Okay, so Councillor Carl Hawkins, here's your first question. What actually made you get into community action in the first place and deciding to run as a councillor with Torridge Common Ground? And, you know, were there any things that you were worried about and frightened about? And were there any kind of big obstacles that you found difficult to get over?
I went to a couple of meetings, really, just to sort of see what it was all about. I think, if I recall, I was actually asked just to take a little bit of video. And while there, the more I listened to the thoughts and opinions of the just general members of the public and what they were bringing up, I found it intriguing. And I just went a couple more times and just found it very interesting that some of these, what you would maybe call normal people, like myself, just wanted to improve things in the area, and it was really good.
Great. Was there stuff that kind of, did you have any fears about running as a councillor, or were there any kind of big obstacles that you found quite difficult to get round?
No, I think when I first started to consider it, somebody brought it up and said, well, why not? I was kind of of the opinion that it's not something I would have ever considered doing. It's always one of those things that's somebody else is doing that. And I didn't have any worries about going ahead and doing this. I kind of feel that nothing ventured, nothing gained, and why not? And why not? You know, just go with flow, and if we're able to put ourselves in a position where we can voice a public opinion, that would be great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Councillor Joel Heron, what made you get into the idea of community action, working with Torridge Common Ground, running as a councillor? You know, what made you decide to get involved in all that in the first place, really? And running for a councillor, you know, were there any kind of major fears and major obstacles that you had to contend with?
I first got involved through an Extinction Rebellion march through Barnstaple, where we had pictures of animals that had gone extinct, and we were marching through Barnstaple town, letting people know about that. And then there was a talk after the march, and that's where someone mentioned Torridge Common Ground, and I thought, I don't know, just kind of got hooked up into the whole thing there, really. Just thought it was interesting, the whole idea of people's assemblies and stuff. And then within a month, I think I'd thought about, well, I'd said, I'll be a councillor, stupidly. But it didn't take long, and after that was a bit of a whirlwind. But I've always been interested in politics, and just thought, yeah, why not? Brilliant. It's a natural opportunity to do stuff. If anyone wants to do it, there isn't anything holding you back. I haven't really encountered any kind of huge obstacles that have got in the way. That's all, really. Go for it. Do it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Kay Korf, same question. What really made you decide to go for it and join Torridge Common Ground, run as a councillor, and were there any kind of big obstacles or fears that you had that you had to kind of get round?
I decided to become a councillor because I'd been to a couple of council meetings and tried to fight for a couple of things that were really important to the community. One being a hosting project for young people that were homeless, and then the next, us as Bideford supporting refugees. And it kind of gave me a bit of a feel. And what was quite obvious from going to the council meetings was that not very much of our community is represented. And I didn't feel like I fitted in there. So I thought, when it came to getting involved with TCG and going into the elections, I thought, well, if a few of us can get in, it might help other people feel that they can have a voice and that they could do it as well. Yeah. The barriers was, I think, pretty much the same as what keeps a lot of people out. So I've got 2 kids and I work full time, so I haven't got a lot of time. And I just wanted to prove that no matter your background, that you can have a go and that you can do it. It is hard work, but it is doable. And if you've got a good support team around you, that makes all the difference.
Brilliant, thanks. Those are great answers. I'm gonna move on and ask. In fact, I'm going to go straight to Joel for this next question. Councillor Joel Heron. What's it been like? You know, you've been a councillor pretty much for a year to the day. What's the journey been like so far? Have you actually changed anything so far? And, you know, what are the sort of lessons that you've learned on the way?
I think one of the biggest lessons, I just wanted to go back to what Kay said. I went to a meeting before I became a councillor and before a lot of things to do with a new housing development that was being built in Appledore. And that was that made me think quite a lot about, Jesus, this is 99.9% of the town saying, no, this is a really crap idea. And the 0.01% came back and said, well, never mind, we're building it anyway, which was just like, wow, that's really weird. And I think, well, moving on to that next question, I think looking at the gap between communities and their local councils and how big that gap is, and the distrust between communities and their local councils, and the low turnout of people that that vote for local councillors and stuff like that. There's just a real space that needs filling by people that live in the communities that are supposed to be, you know, served by those councils.
Along the way on that journey, what kind of lessons have you learnt so far? It's only been a year, but what kind of big realisations have you gone through?
It's slow. It's really slow. Things come up, and if it gets talked about or put through as a motion and gets talked about and maybe kicked out of court, whatever you want to call it, then you need to wait for another 6 months before it can be brought up again. And it's just painfully slow and Victorian, kind of old-fashioned Victorian madness, really, that's running communities at a local level that needs to be brought maybe into the 21st century.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Joel. Councillor Kay Corf. So it's been a year, and it'll be really interesting to know what the journey's been like for you so far, and what changes have you been involved in making happen, if any, and what big lessons have you learnt along the way?
Yeah, the year's gone really quick, and I think a couple of things that I've learned is there's not always a great understanding of all the different issues in Bideford and what everyone's facing. And obviously that goes back to wanting the council to be more diverse and wanting different people on there. You know, most people have been quite open to listening, and I've been able to say if something's been raised about housing or about a certain group of people in the community that I might support, I've been able to input on information then and try and break down a few barriers. So that's been quite good. One thing that I've definitely learned is, and I think it's something we need to change, if you were to walk down the street now and stop random people and say, what does the town council do and what can they do? I don't think many people would know. I really don't. So, that going forward, that's something that I think we really need to open up, is people's understanding of the town council. And another thing that I've learned is there's one committee that's really, really important, and it's the driving force, and that's the Staffing and Financing Committee. So yeah, that's what I've learned. So to get onto that committee next time.
Brilliant.
Be a good thing.
And also to sort of open up, Torridge Common Ground, opening up a programme of education so that people understand how the council works, so it's less unassailable to them, it's more accessible to them. Brilliant. Councillor Carl Hawkins, same question. So, it's been a year, and what's the journey been like? It's been a year since you became a councillor, and what changes have you been involved in making, and what big lessons have you learnt?
We've managed to actually at district level to be able to put some changes together to, for the moment, the standing orders, their constitution was very strict on letting the members of the public speak. A strict 3 minutes and things like that, you know, and we've managed to change the wording on that a little bit now. So it's down to the discretion of the chair. So if somebody does come into the council and does want to speak, but maybe it's their first time and they're very nervous, and it may well take them a bit longer to say what they want to say, we've now got the ability for the chair to extend their time. So I think from a public participation point of view, that was really good to be part of changing that. Things that I would like to change, for us in many ways, it doesn't really matter what background your politics are, but and I've also had people tell me that from a town or a parish point of view, it shouldn't matter, it shouldn't make any difference. What I've noticed is that there are still instances within town council that party politics and sort of point scoring does go on. It's still there, and I'd like to try and get rid of that, because it shouldn't matter. Doing the right thing for your community should matter, not trying to get one over your competition. And I think if I could get rid of something, it would be that.
That's great. Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, go on, Joel, because we're editing anyway.
I was just going to add to what Carl said, because it's quite interesting. On the reverse of that, I found that sometimes, like, the most conservative of councillors are often the ones that are the most helpful. It's really weird, which proves in a way what we're doing is, you know, cutting across party politics is working, because the people you'd expect the least support from are sometimes the people that you're getting the most support from, and vice versa. It is quite weird. It's quite weird. That's
great. Councillor Carl Hawkins, over this journey, who are the people who you've been getting the most support from? Because it's a huge amount of work, because you're district councillor as well as town councillor. So really, where have you been getting the kind of moral support and just, you know, strong support, emotional support to kind of get through what's quite a serious task?
Well, initially it's family, my wife, my kids. They do support me to a degree, but I think because of their age, it's boring politics. Even though we're trying not to make it political, but I'm now in Trinity's phone as Councillor Carl Hawkins. So my youngest loves it. Yeah, friends, family have been very supportive. The group of people that at Torridge Common Ground have been great. It's been great. I think what I enjoy most actually is the fact. I mean, I don't have all the answers to many of the things we're talking about, and just by communicating with the other members of Torridge Common Ground, it fills in gaps, and I think that adds a whole new level of support. Knowing that you're not going to be belittled if you ask a question and also you get that in return as well, where if somebody else doesn't know as much as they would like to know about a particular topic and think you can help, they ask. They don't go off on their own thinking, well, I'm a councillor, I don't need to know that, as long as it looks like I do. I think the support from the entire group, friends, family, and even people on the street when you're talking to them, it's all been very encouraging.
Brilliant. That's so good to hear. It's great to hear that you're in the phone but with your daughter as Councillor Carl Hawkins. That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Carl. Kay, over this year, you know, as I'm saying, it's a pretty serious task. On top of that, you're a mum of two, and you've also got a full-time job, basically working on the front line, supporting homeless people in the area. So you're a tremendous, got a tremendous amount of pressure on your shoulders the whole time. So, you know, during this year, where have you drawn most support from? Who's been there for you?
My partner Stuart, my kids, particularly my daughter May, she kind of gets it. I think she's been to council meetings and protests and stuff since she was a tot. So, yeah, she's on it. Yeah, everyone in my life has been quite supportive. Work's been pretty supportive as well, so that's always helpful. So, yeah, people across the board, and obviously everyone in TCG as well.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. Thanks so much. Councillor Joel Heron. Over this year, you know, of being a councillor, your first year as a councillor, it's obviously been, you know, a big change in your life, and there's a huge amount of workload that all of you have got. So what's really supported you through this time? You know, which people have been there for you to help you through it?
It's interesting actually, because this is my 4th year in Bideford. I lived in South Devon for a long time. Went to art school there and lived there after I left in the early 90s, and I've only been here for 4 years, so really I'm a bit of an outsider. So it is quite interesting, the support I've got from new friends in Bideford and friends from London and girlfriend. And Torridge Common Ground, I think, is the best. I don't know, you could split it really. I had loads of friends helping me deliver leaflets, helping out when I was campaigning. I don't know, it's just the support was there, I think, which is really, if people are concerned, if they're thinking of doing it, about where the support comes from, it miraculously appears.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. All right, guys, so we're on the last question. Councillor Joel Heron. The last question, and I think it's possibly the most important one, because lots of people are going to be seeing these little interviews, and obviously we're really keen for people to join Torridge Common Ground and to consider running as councillors in Torridge District. But of course, also people from across the UK will be seeing these clips. And what would you say to people who are considering, you know, running as councillor, setting up their own sort of grassroots, non-party political platform like a Torridge Common Ground, or for people who are living here, you know, who usually wouldn't even dream of doing something like this? What would you say to people to get them involved?
I'd say, if you are thinking about it and you're not really happy or unsure about how things work at council level, or aren't happy with what councils are doing, then you should do it. You should get involved. And the more like-minded people that are doing it, whether you're in Torridge or Bideford, or whether you're in Fife in Scotland, the more success it's going to have. The more kind of people saying yes to ideas and no to kind of Victorian ways of holding meetings, then the quicker we're going to move into the 21st century, and the easier and the more sustainable communities are going to become, I think, through benefits from that, through devolution and doing it ourselves.
That's fantastic, really inspiring. Thank you so much, Joel. Councillor Kay Corf, the same question. So, you know, what would you say to people to try and get them involved, to feel like, first of all, that they could get involved in running as a councillor, wherever they are, not necessarily just in Torridge Common Ground, in Torridge, but also what would you say to people here to get them to get involved in Torridge Common Ground, and also here to get them to consider running as councillors, you know, where they may be people who thought that they would never do something like this? What would you say to encourage them to get involved?
Well, if you're already thinking about it, it's because you're interested in doing something like this. And if you're interested in doing something like this, then that's the first step. And basically, because we need you to do it, we need people to do it. And like Joel said, not just here, but across the country, because things are changing. Things are changing anyway with, you know, the climate emergency and with what's going on with COVID-19. And we just need a more diverse council across the board, whether it's here in Bideford, across Torridge, in the Midlands, Manchester, Fife, wherever. It needs to be more diverse, because the wider stretch of people you get, the more ideas you get as well, and you get far more different people that are actually experiencing the issues that need to be tackled. So it's a no-brainer, really. You've got to do it.
Brilliant, thanks. That's a fantastic answer. Councillor Carl Hawkins, what would you say to people who are considering getting involved in Torridge Common Ground, first of all, to join us, but also people in this district who are thinking of not only joining Torridge Common Ground, but thinking, you know, I'm not the person who would usually do something like this, but maybe I should run as a councillor. So what would your advice be to them? And of course, people across the country, this film would be seen by a lot of people. So, you know, anyone across the UK who are considering doing something like this, what would your advice be to them?
Has to be just go for it. Just do it. It's if you're trying to. I see on Facebook, for example, there are a lot of people out there. Yeah, I think known as keyboard warriors, and they do a lot of shouting about a lot of different things. They make a lot of noise, and and hidden within that noise, there's usually a good reason, but without acting on it, nothing ever changes. And I think it's about time that if you've got the right kind of drive and you really want to make it work, don't just shout about it, act on it. And one of the places you can act on things to a greater extent is within your council. So yeah, stop shouting about it and do it.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. At this stage, there's probably nothing to add unless you guys can think of anything.
Can I just say one quick thing?
Yeah, John.
Following on, Carl, if and from Cave, that last question, if you're thinking about being a councillor, go to a council meeting and just have a look, because they're all open to the public. And every time, 9 times out of 10, at the beginning of the meeting, it says, are there any members of the public here? And you look round and it's a big 0.